Now, if you are always looking to see how many slides there's not many slides. Okay. But I would guess that these are problems that you'll find difficult. For some reason, they shouldn't be that hard, but they generally are. Okay. I mean, I've used the same objectives the whole time because they're all about the same thing, more or less. But the right equations of parallel and perpendicular lines is what we're doing today. We kind of already did a little bit of, we didn't write the equations. What we did is determine whether lines were parallel or perpendicular. And that part is still the same. In fact, we did it. It came out of this section. You know, we jumped ahead and did those few problems from this homework assignment. What we have to do now, because this unit is about writing the equations, is we're going to write the equations. Now, how are you going to write the equations? The same way you write the equations that we did, in the last two lessons. You got to know the slope and you got to know a point. And if you know that, then you can plug it into either slope-intercept or point-slope. It doesn't matter. The thing about when you have these kinds of problems is they're not going to tell you the slope directly. Instead, they're going to say your slope is the same as the slope of a parallel line, or it's going to say yours. We'll see how these problems are worded, but it's find the equation of a line which goes through this point and is parallel to another line, or find the equation of a line that goes through a point and is perpendicular to another line. They're not telling you the slope, but they're giving you a clue that'll help you find the slope. Right? So what do the clues mean? Well, parallel lines have the same slope. So if they've given you another line and said your line has the same slope as this line, then calculate the slope of that line, and then use it the same way we use it to find equations of lines. If they tell you that your line is perpendicular to another line, then you've got to remember this rule, right? How do you find if the slope of a perpendicular line? For example, if the one slope is 2/3, then the other slope, again, should be opposite reciprocal. What does it mean to be the opposite of a number? A plus becomes a minus becomes a plus. What does it mean to be a reciprocal? Flip the fraction. Okay, so positive 2/3, the opposite reciprocal is negative 3/2. Right? So if they said your line is perpendicular to a line which had a slope of 2/3, then you would say, okay, then I'm going to use negative 3/2. Yeah. It wouldn't be perpendicular if you just flip it. It has to be an opposite sign. Well, now we're not like seeing whether they are perpendicular. We're saying you find the slope which is perpendicular. It's not going to be a neither case. I mean, what if you had negative 7/4? What would be the slope of a perpendicular line? Positive 4/7. Right? Opposite sign. Flip. Remember, what does it mean to be perpendicular? They meet it at 90-degree angles. I mean, and you can just see by doing that one of them has to have a positive slope, the other one must have a negative slope. They have to be opposite signs, and they have to be flip the fraction. And usually the way the books will say that is they'll say that the product is -1, meaning if I multiply 2/3 times negative 3/2, the 2 cancels with the 2, and the 3 cancels with the 3, and all that's left is a negative 1. Right? 7s cancel, 4s cancel, -1. So we got to remember those two things. Parallel lines have the same slope. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. And then we can answer these kinds of questions. Okay, write an equation of a line that passes through -3, -5, and is parallel to y = 3x - 1. Okay, looking at that, y equals 3x minus 1. Could you tell me what the slope is? Where do you look for the slope? Right, m is 3. So essentially they're saying, find the equation of a line that goes through the point -3, -5, and has a slope of 3. Okay, well that's what we've done for the last 2 lessons, right? So, and it doesn't tell you how to do it. If you choose, you could do point slope. You could use slope intercept. Which one do you think is the one you'd rather use? Slope intercept? Right? If I do slope intercept, then I would say the point is -5, so I would say -5, or point is -3, -5. 3 times -3 plus b. And -5 equals -9 plus b. Add 9, add 9. 4 equals b. So here's our equation. Y equals 3x plus 4. Now, they didn't tell you which of those to use, and they didn't even say here when they said write an equation, they didn't even say which form to leave it in. But I know their answer will be in slope-intercept form. If it doesn't say, slope-intercept. And that's why it might be even better to use the slope-intercept instead of the point slope, because actually then you get it in the form you want to have it. Yeah. That's a parallel line. That's not our line. They're giving you the equation of another line, not the one they're asking us for, and saying your line is parallel to it. So all we're taking from this line is the slope. This part has nothing to do with it, right? The -1 is not our line. Okay? So try to do the same. And if you can't see it, there is a little negative in front of the x there. The software, the text editor in this thing doesn't get me do a good minus sign. It's a little bit longer, so it just looks like a little dash in front, which I don't like, but I haven't figured it out yet. So what is the slope of the line you're trying to write an equation for? -1. -1. It's the same as that line, right? Remember, at the point, once you've pulled that out, you don't need this line anymore. That's not anything to do with what we're being asked to do. Get rid of it. Find the equation of a line that goes through -2, 11 and has a slope of -1. So I'm going to do it with point slope just to be different. Y minus 11 equals -x plus 2. Y minus 11 equals -x minus 2. Add 11, add 11. Y equals -x plus 9. Did you get that? Should have been a plus 9? No. What if you did it the other way? Then you would have plugged in 11 equals -1 times -2 plus b. So 11 equals 2 plus b. So b equals 9. So that's the calculation. So that's parallel lines, right? You mean a negative times a negative is positive? Is a negative plus a negative a positive? No. What about in the southern hemisphere? Maybe it is. She was in the southern hemisphere. Come on, it's a joke. It's topical.
Wait, we're in the southern. Southern is down. Yeah. Wouldn't be in the southern hemisphere.
What's that?
Are we in the northern?
We're in the north. We're north of the equator. Australia is south of the equator, right? I mean, things are different. In here in the northern hemisphere, right? A tornado goes around like this. A hurricane goes around like that. In the southern hemisphere, it goes the opposite way. Why? It's something called Coriolis force. You might have had it in a biology or no, probably like an earth science class.
I'm in the sloping class.
You never heard of Coriolis force? I mean, it's really interesting. It's kind of what makes our weather a little bit. But I'm not going to, in the middle of the recording this, go through that, but someday I will. Okay. So now, here's the other kind of problem. It's the only other kind of problem we need to solve here, which is, well, what if they tell you the slope of your line by referring to a perpendicular line? On the previous examples, they used a parallel line. So in this case, they're saying, what is the equation of a line that goes through a particular point, 4, -5, and it's perpendicular to y equals 2x plus 3. So you're supposed to be looking at that line and saying, okay, well, if that line has a slope of 2, then what's the slope of a perpendicular line? -1/2, right? So this, if this is m equals 2, then this should have a slope of m equals -1/2. So you don't need any of that anymore, right? You need this. And again, you could plug it into slope-intercept or point slope, either one. I said this line has a slope of 2, right? So our line must have a slope of -1/2 because they're perpendicular. Opposite reciprocals. Okay, so then whatever way you want to do it, I'm going to put it into point slope. 1 plus y plus 5 equals -1/2 x minus 4. Y plus 5 equals -1/2 x plus 2. Subtract 5. Y is -1/2 x minus 3. Again, they're not telling you the slope directly, but they're giving you the information so that you can determine the slope and then do what we did in the last 2 assignments. And you could do either one. Slope-intercept, point slope. So here's your U-try. So try to do the same thing with that. Look at that equation, figure out the slope, and then figure out what must your slope be if it's perpendicular to that. So what did you say is the slope of your line? -1/4, right? Because this one has a slope of 4. How can you tell that? How do you know that this one has a slope of 4? Okay, because it's in slope-intercept form, and in slope-intercept form, the coefficient of x is slope, right? It won't always be like that. Sometimes you'll get an equation that's not in slope-intercept form, then you've got to put it in slope-intercept form so that you know what the slope is. Okay? But in this case, it was. So if this has a slope of 4, then our line has a slope of -1/4. All right, so now make the equation, find one way or the other, you got to put it into the slope-intercept form. I'll use slope-intercept this time. 3 equals -1/4 times 4 plus b. 3 equals -1 plus b. b equals 4. So y equals -1/4 x plus 4. Right? Do you get that? Did you get the plus 4? Okay, let me see. I might have to add one side. No, not yet. I want to show one more. So 2y 3x -6. So here's the point, and it says perpendicular to the line, 2y equals 3x minus 6. Again, you're supposed to figure out the slope by looking at that line. What is the...
Oh god, you're making me solve for y.
Is the slope 3? No, because it's not solve for y. Solve for y first. Then the slope will be whatever's in front of the x, the coefficient. No. The quiz is not the part that says parallel lines have the same slope, perpendicular lines have slopes which are opposite reciprocals. But it is make an equation of a line with a point and a slope, or 2 points. So you would have to divide by 2. Okay, now what is the slope of this line? Now this line is a slope of 3/2, right? So this line is a slope of negative 2 over 3. So that's what you use. Right? So this is the slope only because it's solved for y. So y equals, or y minus 3 equals negative 2/3 x minus 3. Y minus 3 equals negative 2/3 x. And negative times negative is positive. 3's cancel, plus 2. So just remember, there are a couple homework problems where it's not solved for y. Yeah.
So on the quiz, when you're solving, will you get it wrong if you do y equals mx plus b or y minus y1 equals...
No, either one. Either one you want. Okay. So, questions about this stuff? Just remember, when you see those words, parallel, perpendicular, what it means is they're trying to tell you the slope, just not directly. They want you to figure out the slope by whether or not the lines are parallel, means they're the same, or whether they're perpendicular, which means opposite reciprocals. What's that? Yeah. So the homework is what, 8 problems. But we have a lot of time. I want you to, we're going to work on that first for about 20 minutes because you'll get a lot of practice on what's on the quiz by doing this, and then we'll do the quiz.